All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going on a little documentary-style journey into one of the absolute coolest evolutionary design challenges on Earth, the architecture of life itself. Today, we're zooming in on the microscopic engines that power entirely different worlds, from vast forests and oceans right down to your own body. I'm talking about plant and animal cells. Now, if you've ever felt like biology is just this giant memorization game with too confusing diagrams and way too many complicated labels, well, we're going to change that right now. We're going to look at how living cells are built from the ground up, from first principles. By the end of our time together today, the differences between a plant and animal cell won't just be random facts you have to memorize, they'll feel completely obvious.
So why do the same basic building blocks of life look so completely different? It's a pretty great question, isn't it? Seriously, why does a microscopic cell in a giant maple leaf look so wildly different from a cell in your own bicep? I mean, at first glance, cells can kind of feel like tiny versions of the exact same thing. But once you start looking closely at what a cell actually has to do every single day just to survive, the whole design starts changing. We need to stop asking what random parts does this cell have and start asking what kind of life is this cell actually built to support. Because at the end of the day, it's all about how these incredible little structures solve real-world problems.
Part 1. The Universal Living Core. To really understand those differences, we first have to establish our shared baseline. Before a cell can specialize and do its own unique thing, it has to meet the foundational requirements that absolutely every living cell must possess to even function. Plant and animal cells are not two totally unrelated inventions, right? They're basically two versions of the exact same basic living unit. Think of cells like buildings designed for different jobs. A busy coffee shop and a quiet family house might have totally different layouts, but they all absolutely need walls, a door to let people in, a power source, and a place where decisions are made. Well, cells work the exact same way. Every cell needs a cell membrane to actively separate the inside from the outside. They all need cytoplasm, that jelly-like space that provides a working interior for the chemistry of life. They need a nucleus holding incredibly complex genetic instructions to act as the ultimate control center. And of course, they rely on mitochondria, the tiny power plants releasing usable energy so the cell can actually do work, and ribosomes, which are busy building the proteins that do the cell's heavy lifting. This, right here, this is the absolute minimum kit required for a living cell to function.
Take the cell membrane, for example, a semi-permeable boundary acting like a security gate that actively chooses what enters, stays out, and leaves the cell. It's one of the most important shared features, because frankly, without it, the cell would just be a disorganized puddle of chemicals. But it's not a solid, sealed-off brick wall. It's an active security gate. Think of it like a really strict bouncer at a super exclusive club. It actively chooses what gets in, what stays out, and what gets kicked out. It has to allow vital nutrients and water to pass in and dangerous waste to pass out. It is the non-negotiable first layer of control for both plant and animal cells.
Part 2. The Great Divergence. So we've got our shared core. But here is where the story shifts. From this common foundation, evolutionary design split based on entirely different daily lifestyles. Let's look at how structure basically follows function. This box and bag analogy perfectly illustrates this fundamental divide. Think of a plant cell like a rigid box and an animal cell like a soft bag. A box is designed to rigidly protect shape and provide structural support, while a soft bag is designed to rapidly adjust its shape and allow movement. Think about it. Plants don't move around like animals do. They can't run away from danger or walk over to lean against a wall when they need support. They literally have to grow into their shape and stand firm against gravity and the wind. Animals, on the other hand, must stay dynamic. A soft bag can be squeezed, stretched, and moved, which is exactly what animal cells have to do to respond quickly to their environment. Neither design is better or worse. Each is just perfectly suited to a completely different life strategy.
Part 3. Plant cells. Strength and production.
Let's look closely at plant cells first, and the brilliant engineering solutions they use to stay upright and alive without ever taking a single step. Because plants need to stay firm and upright, they add a tough, extra outer layer called a cell wall. But this wall doesn't just sit there doing nothing. Plant cells actively take in water, and as they do, they create something called turgor pressure. This is the internal pressure created when a plant's large central vacuole fills with water and pushes outward against that rigid cell wall. Imagine trying to pitch a camping tent without the poles. It would just collapse into a sad pile of fabric, right? That's a plant cell without water. Now think of inflating a heavily reinforced tent. The air inside doesn't just create a soft balloon. The rigid frame catches that pressure and turns it into solid shape and height.
The plant's cell wall miraculously turns internal water pressure into lasting structural support.
But how does a microscopic cell actually create that immense pressure? Well, it uses a large central vacuole, which acts exactly like a giant water tank. And here is the beautiful secret to plant architecture. This vacuole isn't just some passive closet for storing extra water and waste. It is a highly active architectural feature. By taking up most of the interior space and aggressively pushing outward against that rigid cell wall, it literally holds the entire cell upright. Animal cells, on the other hand, because they don't need to support heavy, rigid weight, just use much smaller, distributed vacuoles. They're more like tiny storage cupboards scattered throughout the cell, rather than a single, massive, load-bearing water tank.
And the crucial point here is that this microscopic biology has massive, real-world consequences that you can actually see. Imagine a farmer growing a field of okra or spinach. When the plants are well watered, the cells are full, those large central vacuoles are highly pressurized, and the cell walls catch that pressure to keep the leaves perfectly firm and flat to the sun. But when a drought hits and the water supply drops, that internal turgor pressure completely fails. The drooping, wilting leaves you see in a dry garden aren't just magic. That is microscopic cellular design visibly failing at the whole plant level.
Now, plants also solve the problem of getting energy entirely differently. Because a plant is perfectly stationary, it literally cannot go hunting or foraging for food when it gets hungry. So it builds its own food-making machinery right inside the cell. These are the chloroplasts. Imagine if you could just stand out in the sun and magically make your own lunch inside your body. That is the exact superpower chloroplasts give to plants. If an animal cell is like a household that constantly has to go to the store to buy its fuel from the outside world, a plant cell is a self-sufficient household completely equipped with its own solar panels. Chloroplasts actively capture sunlight and turn it into stored chemical energy, granting the plant total independence.
Part 4. Animal cells, flexibility, and movement.
So let's transition over to animal cells. Why in the world would they completely trade away that powerful rigid cell wall and the amazing ability to make their own solar-powered food? Well, it all comes down to a dynamic, active lifestyle. Animal cells absolutely demand flexibility. Animal bodies depend entirely on movement, rapid communication, and highly specialized tissues. Think about your own body right now as you're listening to this. Your muscle cells have to physically contract and relax so you can sit upright or walk across a room. Your nerve cells are constantly firing long, delicate signals all the way to your brain. Your white blood cells literally have to change their shape to squeeze through tight tissues just to fight off an infection. And your skin cells? They must form a stretching, bending, flexible layer. None of these vital, life-saving functions would be remotely possible if animal cells were trapped inside rigid, box-like walls. They happily trade away that structural rigidity for the incredible power of adaptability.
And because there is no cell wall, the animal cell membrane really has to step up. It becomes incredibly important. It's not just a soft border, it becomes a highly interactive, load-bearing central decision maker. It has to regulate everything that enters and leaves, somehow preserve the cell shape just enough to function, and rapidly respond to chemical signals from neighboring cells. The animal membrane's job feels so much more complex because it doesn't have a thick protective outer wall to lean on for stability. It's doing a lot of the heavy lifting.
Part 5. The whole system connects.
When you look at all of this together, the whole system really starts to click. A cell is not just a random list of disconnected parts you have to memorize for a biology test. It is a deeply connected system of evolutionary solutions. Notice how every single piece falls perfectly into place. The cell wall firmly resists internal pressure, the massive vacuole provides that outer pressure, and the chloroplasts feed the whole stationary system. That is the ultimate recipe for a plant. Meanwhile, the animal cell completely trades all of that away for the sheer freedom to move, relying on a flexible membrane and smaller compartments to reshape and specialize. Everything works together as an incredible, unified team.
Part 6. Form responds to life. Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of our journey today. The fundamental takeaway about biology and evolutionary design is that form always responds to life. It's truly that simple. Plant cells win on support. Animal cells win on flexibility. One is absolutely not a better or more advanced version of the other. They are just different answers to different problems. They use the exact same basic living toolkit to solve totally different life challenges. So just to concisely recap what we discovered, both types of cells completely share the universal core, a membrane, cytoplasm, a nucleus, mitochondria, and ribosomes. But they diverge beautifully at their lifestyle. Plants build rigid cell walls,
massive pressure-filled vacuoles, and solar-powered chloroplasts so they can stand tall and make their own food. Animals, however, ditch the rigid wall and the chloroplasts entirely, relying on highly flexible membranes and small vacuoles so they can move, hunt, and adapt to a rapidly changing world. So, I want to leave you with this final thought. Next time you look at a biology diagram, I challenge you to stop trying to memorize a shopping list of labels. Instead, ask yourself, what kind of life is this cell built to support? Why does this design have to be exactly this way? Once you adopt that framework, biology stops being a memorization game, and the incredible, logical machinery of life finally reveals itself. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the right questions.